but we don't see that in necessarily in such a parochial way or such a nationalistic way, like it's the Olympics or something like that, country by country. Canadian art does not, in and of itself, is no more or less interesting to me than art from any other country. But I tend to not see so much, you know, artwork and art scenes in terms of the countries they're in the world we live in today. It's a global world. I know it's an overused term, and of course, you know, globalization can now mean many things. I take it that you know, what is interesting and important about contemporary Canadian art is where it fits in globally or internationally. It's not our intention here to you know, sort of assert Canadian art or artists as being, you know, better than anyone else, or say, you know, raw Canadian artists. But we, our mission is to do what we can to include contemporary artistic discourse, contemporary Canadian culture in an international discourse. And I think Canada, being a fairly ethnically and culturally diverse country, I think we have a lot to contribute to that international discourse, especially given the global nature of the world today. I think maybe in the 1980s it was perfectly feasible for artists to have their entire careers here in Toronto, and for a handful of good art galleries to survive. That's not the case anymore. And more the art dealers, and especially the younger art dealers and the artists, are becoming more globally engaged out of necessity. So, but again, I should say I have had some success in my career, or being, what would you say, being credited for being innovative. I don't necessarily think that some of the projects I've done are so innovative necessarily, but I think I've been quite good at ripping off innovations from the cutting edge of international contemporary art and culture. As I say, an exhibition which I know over the course of the weeks it was on here, just the nature of that exhibition and the tone of that exhibition, the way it was set up, I do know that it rubbed some of, how do we say, the more established or older people from the art scene. They didn't, I don't think they got that show or necessarily knew how to respond to it. To see tattoo and illustration, you know, rubbing shoulders with contemporary art. Furthermore, personal expressions being, you know, mixed in with some, you know, substantial, you know, social and political issues. You know, that was a tough show. It was a tough show to be in. It was a tough show to look at. It was a tough show to think about. But I do know from the feedback that I received, you know, particularly art world academics over the age of 40, clearly rejected that show and kind of had a tough time with it. I found the general population and younger people from the art world in particular, really, again, whether or not they liked that show, were quite enthusiastic about the nature of it. Not the kind of a show that we see in Toronto necessarily. As I say, they had this kind of approach to a show with sound, music, tattoo, rock and roll, death metal, you know, and soundtracks playing. It's not such a stretch. If you think the Palais de Tokyo in Paris, or types of exhibitions that they have in Japan and Taiwan, or, you know, as I said, the Yerba Buena Center in San Francisco, some of these very, you know, cutting edge places with these kind of more cutting edge programs. This kind of a show, I think, was sort of a current international flavor to that show. And I suppose I should be careful saying this, but I think you know, international flavors and engagement has not been Toronto's strong point in the last 20 or 30 years.